One lottery ticket makes a big difference for our state students. And when I say big, I mean bigger than jackpot big. Since 2002, South Carolina students have benefited from more than $6 billion in lottery-funded scholarships and grants, including the Life, Hope, and Palmetto Fellow Scholarships. With every lottery play, you're supporting our students, and that adds up in a big way. That's why education is our middle name. Learn more at sceducationlottery.com/betteryou.
How to have fun, anytime, anywhere. Step 1. Go to ChumbaCasino.com.
ChumbaCasino.com. Got it.
Step 2. Collect your welcome bonus.
Come to Papa welcome bonus.
Step 3. Play hundreds of casino-style games for free.
That's a lot of games. All for free?
Step 4. Unleash your excitement.
Woohoo!
Chumba Casino has been delivering thrills for over a decade. So claim your free welcome bonus now and live the Chumba life. Visit ChumbaCasino.com. VGW Group. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
On Saturday, February 22nd at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, it's the Pro Volleyball Federation's first All-Star match. The league's biggest stars will clash in a can't-miss event hosted in the Indy metro area, home of the Indy Ignite. Catch every serve, spike, and save live on CBS. Don't miss this historic showdown of volleyball's finest. The Pro Volleyball Federation All-Star Match on February 22nd at 1:30 p.m. Be there.
All right, perhaps we should clear up what I put it under the classification of a story in which we're putting out a fire where there really wasn't any smoke in the first place, and it is Super Bowl week related, and it is Minnesota Vikings related. KOC wins, and I don't even know who votes on this version of Coach of the Year. Is this the Associated Press stuff? Is this the official stuff?
I think it's media.
I think it's media. I think it's the official thing. He wins Coach of the Year. And then when you win that kind of award, obviously the Jackals, you get many media opportunities, and then it's almost like when you win an Oscar, there's the after opportunity for the international press to get in front of you and
they whisk you
take
backstage,
photos and ask you questions, and you get a chance to say where you got your gown. Or where you got your tux,
that's before,
or whatever the case may be.
The red carpet.
Well, I think you can do both. And anyway, in any case, he takes several questions after, and consecutively, one was about working with Darnold, and the next was about JJ. And one of the media outlets, you'll refresh my memory on who.
I believe it was Dave Burkett.
And do we know who that is?
Dave Burkett writes for the Free Press in Detroit.
In Detroit, okay. And he seems to convey what? I think you know more about that part of it than I do.
Well, I'll read the tweet that he sent out last night, 18 hours ago.
Perfect.
Kevin O'Connell in his Coach of the Year news conference. Our goal is to win a championship, and Sam Darnold is going to be a huge part of it when we do it. And then he adds, sure sounds like the Vikings want to ride with Darnold next year.
Okay, so
that gets everyone's attention.
It definitely gets everybody's attention. And so what it forced a lot of us to do is, all right, let's go back and listen to what KOC said that prompted that summation of his post-winning the award celebration. And so I listened to the Darnold portion, and all I heard was, go way back with him. Always remember his toughness going back to his last game in college. Knew him well. Knows he's had some trials and tribulations. Came to us, and we had a wonderful time. And I tried to challenge him on some things about footwork, about planting his feet, the whole bit. And we, had some success. And I'll always value the time that we have been working together. And I'm going, well, that doesn't seem all that bold or brash or controversial. What I didn't listen to, I guess, is the part about JJ next, which you say is apparently where some of the confusion came in, because
that's what I think. Yeah,
he was more frontal. It sounds like he, being KOC, in his proclamations with JJ, who, as far as I know, continues to be under contract with the Minnesota Vikings.
He is, yes.
So, what would you say? How would you convey what he said during the JJ
about
portion
JJ?
Yes,
he's unbelievable. He sets the tone for the building, which is rare for wide receivers. And our goal is to win a championship. And when we do, he's going to be a big part of it.
Now, that would sound also not all that controversial. But apparently, Detroit Free Press guy somehow conflated or, combined one with the other and made it sound like he's basically, KOC as much as proclaimed that Darnold, they're committed to Darnold next season, and they're hoping he'll lead them to the Super Bowl, which is not anything close to what was actually said. And if he got closer to that championship aspiration, it was when he was talking about his under contract wide receiver, correct?
100% correct.
So then, because of the confusion, KOC had it was another.
It was like a conference call with local reporters.
Okay, where I think the idea was, well, do you want to clarify this thing? And KOC took the high road. He did not hammer the reporter, but I think the first comment was something about whether that. I feel like there's some confusion, or it
wasn't 100% like that, is what he said.
Exactly it. So that's why I say, well, I don't think there was any smoke, let alone there being a fire in this situation. Like, oh boy, he is basically saying Sam Darnold is back. And if you keep reading with the local reporters, we know he has. I mean, he certainly makes it sound like they're going to continue to try to have Darnold in the mix, or to see what, they want to have that as a possibility, but they understand that he has earned the opportunity to go out and test the market. Now, some have conveyed that as suggesting that the Vikings aren't going to franchise him, because if the Vikings franchise him, Darnold doesn't have that opportunity, right? So if there's any news to it, I think that may be more of it, whether he intended to do it or not, even though I'm not sure that moved the bar all that much from what we previously thought, that, it was more likely that they were going to let him test the waters. And I think part of it on the franchising is, of course, the franchising is nice because it's only 1 year, but then it's $41 million, right? So then you're back to a huge chunk of money, as opposed to, hey, would you come back for the next 2 years at $40 million total? Like 2 years, $20 million each. So, and I guess the Free Press guy hasn't backpedaled at all, right? Which is bizarre to me, because that's like he flat out unless there's something else that O'Connell said that has not been released.
I don't think there is.
He flat out, utterly and completely invented a storyline that had nothing to do with what he actually told reporters.
I don't think he has ever gone back and corrected it, because our guy Seifert this morning tweeted out a story, and the first word was facts from last night. Facts from last night. And then talked about all the things that we just talked about, laid out everything that KOC said. So I think there's a little reporter on reporter crime there from our guy Seifert. And in this case, it's earned, because he doubled down on it multiple times last night, Dave Burkett, saying, because Carlton Corner tweeted at him, did he actually say that, or were you joking? Burkett says, WTF, yeah, he actually said that. Someone asked him about Darnold, and that was his answer. I wasn't recording it because I wasn't writing about it. Just came back from HOF presser as Gates was bouncing to different stops when he got asked. Those pressers are like 3 questions long for what it's worth. So he was basically saying, yeah, he said it. I heard it. I didn't record it because I wasn't really covering it, but that's what I heard. And no one else has said that anywhere.
Oh, no, and we've heard the recording. I mean, you can actually listen to, via YouTube or wherever, you can listen to the entire press conference post winning the award. Right?
And nowhere on his Twitter profile has he clarified or cleaned up anything.
Well, that's unfortunate, because it's a big swing and a miss about a significant issue. Maybe he's doing some deep, like some dirty tricks, Watergate-style stuff for Dan Campbell and on behalf of the Detroit Lions, trying to mess with this whole equilibrium thing.
Can you rule it out?
A schism between the team and the quarterback.
And then he shamed some Vikings fan who called him a bozo. He said, damn, Vikings fans mad their coach publicly supports his quarterback. Laughing emoji.
Yeah, but
that's not what he did.
It's not what he did at all.
I mean, he did support him.
Well, no, the point is, if all KOC did was support his quarterback, there'd be no story here. That's very different than saying, in effect, as the Detroit reporter is suggesting, that, well, it sure looks like they think they want to go to the Super Bowl next year, and Darnold's going to be the guy. There's nothing in there that may be true, but there's nothing in there from which you can convey the tweet that is offered publicly supporting. And the fan, I'm guessing, wasn't mad about the head coach supporting the QB.
Right.
The fan was mad of how can you botch and misrepresent a pretty vanilla series of comments from a head coach who this last year did work with Sam Darnold, right? Very strange. Not a good look. And I let this be proof, because I get accused of this all the time. Oh, you never rip the media. You always stand tall for your brothers and sisters in the media. Maybe I do too much. We're not doing it in this case because this was a swing and a miss. This is a blunder. And if he's got a good boss, to be honest, is it Free Press? Detroit Free Press?
Yeah.
If he's got a good boss, the boss is saying, you got to fix this.
Right. This
is not a good look for us. Mistakes happen. But
sure.
Let's correct the record and say, I'm listening to this. There's nothing in here. Nothing in here that equates with what you are conveying. And that's what, and I'm sure that's probably what is annoying Seifert and local beat reporters. Because my guess is his boss, ESPN guy, is calling Seifert going, how do you miss this?
Right.
How did you not see this? Darnold's back, according to the way the head coach talked about him after winning this big award. Very strange.
Well, I'm sure Ben Goessling will share his insights on how his night went last night as someone who had to cover last night as well.
Right.
And I'm guessing was on that call later in the night to try to get all of that clarified. Should we give some money away? Or at least try to?
Let's do it.
Money is the keyword for the 4 o'clock hour in our national cash contest. As we try to put a grain in your hand, go to KFAN.com and make the keyword money.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? If you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. Choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Goat Guy writes that according to a community note under Burkett's original tweet, KOC was referring to Jefferson, not Darnold. Yeah, that's what we were just talking about. The now famous community note. A lot of times they do a pretty decent job of fact checking. Sometimes not so much. But in this case, there's all you have to do is, again, there's some quotes that can be subject to interpretation, right? Where you go, well, it seems to be shading it a little bit, or it's a little shaky, or it sounds like they're saying one thing meaning another, and we can have that. You could say, well, there's no right or wrong to that. It's a matter of subjectivity and interpretation and all that kind of good stuff. But in this case, it's just a flat out blunder. It's just a media blunder where some projecting. Either he confused, like I said, said, God, I know somewhere in there he made it sound like they're going to try to win a championship with this guy. But then the job is, even if you haven't taken notes, is to go back and listen and go, well, actually, he was saying that about Justin Jefferson, who's under contract with the team.
Even if it's just a tweet.
That's a very different, set. And it's Super Bowl week, okay, where this is more of a national story this week. Anybody who wins awards has more of a platform. And it's one of the key off-season storylines in the entire league. There are not that many coveted free agent quarterbacks that are going to be available. We can argue about how coveted Darnold should be, the way that his season and postseason ended. But the fact is, he's probably the biggest name among free agent quarterbacks, correct? So that being the case, you might want to get that right. Maybe you care about it less when you're based in Detroit. But in this case, because there's a national component to it this week, you're kind of writing for everybody. And so was he, by the way, was he there for this event at all? He was.
Yeah, because that's what he said. He was walking by Kevin O'Connell because Antonio Gates had just done his Hall of Fame one. And so he just kind of heard it in passing, and that's where he went.
Heard it in passing. How do you spell, what's his Twitter handle?
Let me see. I don't think I'm on it anymore.
Dave Burkett, you said?
Yeah, DaveBirkett.
Birkett?
Yes, sir.
I can't. There's no hope for me. Burkett.
There's no hope for me.
There it is. Oh, yeah. Author, Detroit Lions, and Illustrated Timeline. That's the guy, Dave Burkett.
Yeah, 4-time Michigan Sports Writer of the Year.
Yeah. Let me scroll down here. Video from... So the tweet is still up, right?
Yeah, I just read from it.
Yeah, here it is. So let me give you an example. Here's an example of how over his skis he is on this thing. Because somebody named Carlton Corner says, so did he actually say that, or were you joking? And the Burkett reply is, WTF. Yeah, he actually said that. someone asked him about Darnold, and that was his answer. I wasn't recording it because I wasn't writing about it. This is embarrassing. Just came back from the Hall of Fame presser as Gates was bouncing to different stops when he got asked. These pressers are like 3 questions long for what it's worth. That's not even close. And I guess what's bugging me is, look, I've made plenty of blunders as an ink-stained wretch. We all do. But how cavalier he is about it and doubling down on it like, well, yeah, actually, someone asked about Darnold and that was his answer. It's like, no, that wasn't his answer about Darnold. That was his answer about Jefferson. Darnold, it was the vanilla. The question was, tell us about working with Darnold. That was the question. It wasn't about, well, is he going to be back next year? It was, what was that like? And he starts by talking about how far back he went with him, right? And what he remembered about him, and what he learned about him, and what he thought about him, and then he worked with him, and here's what we tried to work on, and it was a great experience, and blah, 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 blah. This is bizarre. Yeah, and then I see Skull Guy says, Bozo, damn, Vikings fans mad their coach publicly supports his quarterback. The original tweet, as you said, Kevin O'Connell, in his Coach of the Year news conference, our goal is to win a championship, and Sam Darnold is going to be a huge part of it when we do it. He's inventing crap. This is not even a borderline call, is it? And no. So he never really seems to respond because a lot of people are getting in on it. And he never really seems to respond to that, right? I mean, he never like, okay, maybe I jumped the gun, or maybe there's a little bit of, it's almost like it's not really my story, so it kind of moves on.
All he has to do is go back and go, looks like I got this wrong. Apologies, everybody. Move on.
Well, here's an even weirder one. A fake Carl Gerbschmidt is among those replying, and he calls him a jackass, but it's not even the real. It's Carl Gerbschmidt with a check mark, but it's not the Carl Gerbschmidt. You see that one?
I didn't, no.
Yeah. Jackass.
When you have the fake
Bozo.
Carl on you, is that worse than having the real Carl?
Much, I would say. I don't know. It's hard to say. Show him this. I'm trying to scroll down to see if at any point he responds, but it doesn't appear that he does. This tweet is still up somehow. That's a bad one. It's embarrassing. Sometimes you just got to take the L, and go, well, I was walking by, I misinterpreted it, or I misunderstood it, or I put 2 parts of it together, and I really shouldn't have. That's all. I mean, I don't think he needs to go to prison over it or lose his job over it. But the way he's doubling down and being so cavalier about it it's not a professional look at all. It's rather embarrassing. All right, let's do this. Let me give you the lineup the rest of the way. We have, I think, Lavelle for 5:30. Is that correct? Is that the plan?
He's ready to go.
And if you've got questions for Ben Goessling, I'm sure we'll address this particular topic because I'm sure he, too, got a call from his boss saying, what gives? How do we miss this story? Well, it's because there was no story here in this case. Goessling on that. If you have questions for him, hit the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line. That is 64686. There's a Lonely Wolves fan wants to know if we have any thoughts on the nice Wolves win last night. That'll be a part of the top 5 at 5 for sure. And I'm sure it'll be part of the conversation with Lavelle, if not sooner. I don't want to a commemorative print. I don't want to raise a banner like we've arrived, but there's some things I think that we could discuss off this particular game as well. So, in any case, let's get a pause in and keep the text coming for Ben, who I don't think is in New Orleans. I think it's Mark Craig. We'll get his reaction to the Jared Allen news. I think Jared was on with PA this morning.
Was he?
I was told, yeah, because I asked Abbott if we could get him on, and he said, because I said, was he on with PA? And he said, I think for briefly at least, he was. Jared Allen to the Hall of Fame, former Minnesota Vikings, so there'll be a Vikings connection to the whole Hall of Fame proceedings as well. But questions on that, questions on other things, Super Bowl 59, and who knows what else. Get them in now. 64686, Bradshaw and Bryant, KFAN text line. Back with Mr. Goessling next.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply.
Standard Heating and Air Conditioning brings us each and every week this football season. Ben Goessling, kind enough to join us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline on this Friday night. Lavelle will join in about 1 hour. You are not covering Super Bowl there in New Orleans. That is confirmed, correct? You had told us that last week. They're still going to play the game. It'll be number 59 on Sunday, as you know. The Eagles taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. I do want to get some of your view on that, although I think you were off the hook on the prediction, right? The weekly prediction that you usually do for Vikings games. I think Mark Craig, via the Star Tribune, because he's there, is doing said prediction. So we'll get to that in a minute. Look, I understand. I think there's probably a reluctance for reporters getting on other reporters, right? Because everybody knows, we've all had our moments where we go, we kind of blew that, or I don't want to be holier than thou and act like I never, took a misstep. But I guess I am. I'm getting more worked up on it by the hour. The report from a Detroit Free Press writer that utterly and completely just flat out misrepresented the KOC briefing after he meets with the Jackals. And they're congratulating him on winning the Coach of the Year award. And I guess I'm trying to understand why, in this case, there's not a greater willingness to say, hey, look, upon further review, I think I put two parts of the interview together, and he was actually, when he's talking about championships, KOC was talking about JJ. Yes. I think it puts everybody, and then it kind of puts you guys on the defensive here locally, which I assume is why there ended up being a scrum via conference call with the head coach to try to clear the air. Is that correct? Give us the sequence.
Yeah, so I saw it on Twitter last night. Kevin O'Connell's talking to reporters in New Orleans when he gets the Coach of the Year award, talking in NFL honors. They bring him in for a few questions. It's pretty quick. There was not video of it initially, right. And the reporter, Dave Burkett, who's covered the Lions for a long time, is a Hall of Fame voter. He's down there covering Hall of Fame stuff, covering the Super Bowl, and tweeted out the quote. So I'm kind of thinking, okay, Dave is really good at what he does and really reliable. So I'm thinking, okay, this must be something that I can take at face value, which is, I think, how just about everybody on the beat saw it and went along with it. And then I don't quite know where it became obvious that it was a misstep. I don't know if the press conference was on TV. I mean, the NFL honors was still going on, and we were kind of waiting on a local conference call. We were supposed to get O'Connell and then Jared Allen to go into the Hall of Fame. All of this stuff is kind of happening at once. And O'Connell gets on with us, talks about Coach of the Year, and then I think Seifert asked him about this quote, and that's when O'Connell said, well, it's not 100% right. I was talking about – he didn't directly say I was talking about Jefferson in the quote, but if you go back and watch the video, it's obvious that he was talking about Justin Jefferson, not Sam Darnold. So, and then O'Connell kind of went back to the things that he said about he's earned the right to be a free agent and we love him and all of this kind of stuff. And yeah, I don't know. I have been in those settings a couple of times and everything's flying at you awfully quickly. Yeah. And not to say that this excuses any of it, but I don't know that everybody who was there got a full sense of the quote. He might have been kind of doing a flyby and saying, oh, he must have been talking about Darnold. And I would think that when there's been as much reaction to it as there's been, it would kind of lead you to say, okay, I should probably figure this out. But I think a lot of it was things just flying really fast. And, it certainly was a mistake and one that needs to be corrected. But I know Dave awfully well, and I don't think there was anything nefarious. There was no oh, Dan Campbell didn't win Coach of the Year. Right. I'm having some vendetta. I've seen some of that stuff on social media, and that's not. I'm pretty confident that's not what it was about.
No, we actually kidded about that, but it was pretty clear we were kidding about the possibility that it's a White House or like a Watergate era plumber's dirty tricks campaign.
I saw a lot of that from fans last night too.
Yeah, but to be honest, the reason I'm not totally blaming, or I guess better way to put it, I'm not totally surprised that in a conspiracy world, fans don't resort to that or start wondering about that when he does such a bad job of explaining it. In fact, so badly that when some fan called him a bozo, he said, "Why they apparently don't like the KOC supporting his quarterback." Well, that's not the issue. That you're changing the subject. The issue is whether you misrepresented a step taken by the head coach that seemed to indicate largely that he's coming back, man, and we're going to find a way to bring him back, which ultimately might happen. But that's very different than what was said in that environment. It's very curious and very strange that at some point you just don't go, look, I was blowing by. I put a couple things together, but let me just, you don't even have to kill yourself, but just correct the record and say, here's the deal. It should not be that difficult. And the fact that he's that cavalier about it, I guess falls into the classification of he doesn't care because he covers the Lions and he thinks, why am I going to worry about some angry Vikings fans? Well, he shouldn't be worried about angry Vikings fans. He should be worried about what he ended up doing to media members needlessly and having to chase a story that was absolutely 100% not a story.
Yeah, you're right. And I think my sense of it has been that he may not have a full realization of the mistake and that the quote was in fact about Jefferson. I would think social media has probably made that fairly clear by this point if he's been on there today. And I don't know if he has. I haven't talked with him about that specifically, but I think it was probably some of that. But yeah, again, when you see this happening, and I'm sure some of the reaction has gotten to him at this point, you follow up on it, own your mistake. I mean, a lot of this stuff everybody spends so much time kind of inventing some of these narratives and everybody's out to just make a splash and try to, get a reaction or get headlines and all of these things that reporters kind of get accused of doing. That is not the case. I mean, that's not how people go about the job. But if you don't own your mistakes, if you're not transparent, if you're not willing to be like, yeah, here's how I screwed up, and then you take a little bit of the blowback for it, you do end up, I think, in a bad spot. So transparency when you screw up, as everybody does, I think is an important thing. And we may still get there. But yeah, it has added to a little bit of the spice on this one that I think is probably worthwhile because it was we've seen now it was definitely a mistake.
Yeah, no question about that. So has the Darnold story in your mind been advanced in any way, in any real way, in any accurate way compared to where we were a week ago? Are there any smoke signals? Are there any, because what I did note when he talked to you guys, could you infer by what he said there, and I'm not proclaiming this, I'm asking this, by what he said during that conversation, that mean that in effect he was saying he's got a chance to find out what the market is. In other words, we're not going to franchise him. Am I reading too much into those comments, or do we already kind of know that, do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're saying he's earned the right to be a free agent, I mean, that language is very, very similar to what he used with Kirk Cousins last year. And a lot of their approach with Cousins was, okay, here's our offer. You can shop that around and see what the market does to respond to that. And then ultimately, of course, Kirk Cousins leaves. Yeah, I mean, I think you could. There's a line of thinking that I think I could support of getting there. I don't know that O'Connell was saying it in a way that was meant to close that door. I mean, I think you could read those comments and interpret them that way. I think that's completely fair. I'm not sure that O'Connell was trying to rule out the franchise tag by saying it. I think in some ways it's a thing that you say on February 6th, knowing that the franchise tag deadline is still a month away. And I think they will probably have a lot of these conversations about what do we want to do in the weeks to come. And he'll get asked these things again at the Combine in a couple of weeks, and it'll be interesting to see if his answer has changed any to that point. But, yeah, I mean, if he is going to take it to free agency, I think, he's going to have a market, I would expect. And I think the best way for them to ensure that they're in charge of it would be to put the tag on him. So it's going to be interesting to see how these next few weeks go on that front. And I think a lot of this is probably still to be determined.
We are chatting with Ben Goessling. It is, of course, Super Bowl week. The Vikings, the fan has learned, will not be playing. The Chiefs and the Eagles will be playing. And we're chatting with Ben about any Vikings news worth covering and also some things about this Super Bowl week. Before we get to anything else you think is newsworthy that's changed regarding the team, the Jared Allen news, refresh my memory on how many years he's been up for this thing and whether the handwriting was that it was going to come his way, or that there was any element of surprise that he did break through this time.
Well, I think this was his 5th year where he was eligible for it, if I'm not mistaken. And it did seem like it was moving toward the possibility of him getting in. I mean, and some of this is just from, some of the things Mark will tell us about what it was like in the room. But he seemed to think, and Mark Craig has the Hall of Fame vote in our market. So he's in those deliberations, and he has a kind of a behind the scenes thing on it today, which was pretty interesting. I think it was an 18-minute discussion or something like that on Jared this time around. But there has been, I think, more of a growing sentiment that he was Hall of Fame worthy. And it's noteworthy this year because the class was smaller. I mean, they only let 4 people in this year when it's been 6 or 7, I think a lot of recent years. But it did seem like it was more likely that it was going to happen for him this year. And I think it's deserved. I covered him his last 2 years with the Vikings, I believe, and still was playing at an awfully high level at that point. Probably not quite at the peak of what we saw, but, I can remember watching a lot of those games when he was just terrorizing the Packers, especially that year that Favre beat Rodgers twice. I mean, those games were made about Favre versus Rodgers, but in a lot of ways, that first game especially turned because of Jared Allen and the fact that he was unblockable. And there were a lot of games, I think, in that era that the Vikings were as dominant as they were on that front. I mean, you had the Williams wall, yes, and you had good pass rushing with Ray Edwards and Brian Robinson on the other side. But Jared was playing at a level that was as important to that group as anything you would find on that front. And I think it's deserved that he's going in, and certainly the Vikings and the ways that his career, the ways that his life, he's talked about this quite a bit, the ways that his life changed in Minnesota.
Yeah, it did.
He's going to be a big part of it. And I'm sure his induction speech will be entertaining. I think it'll be pretty colorful, and I'm sure he will have a lot of fond memories to share from Minnesota when he is inducted this summer.
Well, I do remember, when that trade was consummated, and I do remember all of us going, well, he's talented. Obviously, we all understood what he might represent to the team. That's a rare talent, even then, in terms of having an outside pass rusher. But it was, okay, he's got some issues. As he learned his lesson, is the team sending the wrong statement, sort of, quote-unquote, looking the other way? But as far as I know, and you can speak to this better than me, as far as any of us know, he cleaned that up, and he figured some important things out in his life, and it ended up, here in that regard, on a personal level, being very much a success story.
Yes, it did. There's no doubt about that. And he was one of the players that I remember when Leslie Frazier got fired. Obviously, Leslie Frazier was the head coach that in Jared's last 3.5 years in Minnesota, but his defensive coordinator really from the beginning. I mean, Jared was one of the people in the locker room the day that Leslie Frazier got fired that talked about, hey, he helped me clean a lot of this up. He helped me understand that my relationship with alcohol needed to change and I needed to just live differently. And so you heard a lot of things. I think there were some other people that helped with that in Jared's case too, but you heard a lot of things. I remember that day, I guess 12 years ago or so, or whatever it was, that was pretty instrumental in his development as a person. And just, you have to be able to handle those things as a person off the field to continue your career as successfully as he did on the field. And I think a lot of that for him in Minnesota was why he's standing where he is, because he continued to be awfully productive, but he also figured out how to handle all of the life that comes with being a successful professional athlete and how to do it in a way that was frankly different than what he'd been doing before.
The Super Bowl, as we said, is certainly on paper looks like an entertaining matchup and a close matchup. The spread last I saw was 1.5 points, I think.
Yeah.
So give me a sense of what you think it's fair to expect in this game. I had Billick on a couple of days ago, and Billick did the usual. He said, there's a part of me that says, I can name 9 things where the Chiefs are vulnerable, but then there's Mahomes, and they've got a problem with this, but then there's Mahomes. And yet, ultimately, he picked the Eagles to win. It was almost like, I know I may regret it, but for whatever reason, he thinks the Eagles, because of their strength at the line of scrimmage, both offensive line and defensive line, and the Barkley factor, that they might find a way to get this thing done. How do you view it?
Yeah, I mean, when I've been asked to pick it, I've been picking the Chiefs largely because of Mahomes. But I do think this is different. I mean, this one, these two teams played 2 years ago, and it came right down to the end. It was an incredibly entertaining game. I think that was in Arizona, so there was a lot of slipping around on the field in that game, if I remember it right. But that game was right down to the wire in the fourth quarter, and I think came down to a couple of Chiefs red zone series where they're able to convert and score touchdowns. But Barkley doing what he's done, I think, does change the matchup. I think that is going to be a lot for the Chiefs to handle because of how dynamic he's been and because of how much the Eagles can rely on both him and Jalen Hurts to just control the game. I mean, you can do a lot with those two guys to say, we're going to beat you up. We are going to keep your offense off the field. We're going to be able to do what we want to do. And then when you get on the field, you're either playing from behind or you're not working with as much time to extend drives as you might want to have. I think all of those things can have a pretty major impact on the flow of a game. I mean, it's all of the reasons that we talk about when people advocate for the running game. It's not just about scoring 45 points a game. It's about the impact it has keeping your defense fresh, keeping their offense out of the rhythm that they'd like to get in. So I think Barkley being part of that with a team that has been pretty committed to the run with the running backs and Hurts over the years, it's a significant weapon. And I think if the Chiefs are going to win this game, they're going to have an answer for that because Barkley is, he's the NFL Offensive Player of the Year, had one of those seasons that is like few in NFL history at the running back position. And if the Eagles win it, I expect he'll have a large say in how they get there.
Yeah, that's all very fair to say. And I think it is a terrific matchup. That's why I'm as curious as anybody to see. Because to me, that is really the story of it, is that despite all you laid out, are the Chiefs so good or so resourceful at the right time? And is Mahomes so good that he renders it all meaningless, right? That he, in his own way, he makes a couple of plays and you go, well, that's it. That's why he is who he is. Your compadre, Mark Craig, had a great stat today laying out, Mahomes is no longer as pure a running quarterback or doesn't do it as often as a lot of guys, right? And start to finish. But as he points out, his Super Bowl, for example, his Super Bowl numbers as a runner at the right time, I think he wrote 13 first downs and many times with more than like 7 or 8 yards to go. And again, sneaky plays that give them 4 more downs, extends the possession. And you wonder if in the end he's going to be able to do that again at the right time because he has along this particular playoff route as well. He clearly doesn't want to do that much of it anymore, but he's so resourceful at doing it. And you wonder if that ends up, again, being the X factor or the Eagles can figure out, because they got obviously very good defensive coaches, some sort of antidote to dealing with that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, a lot of those plays that he makes are not going to be on highlight films. They're not going to shape the narratives of how the game went. But if it's 3rd and 8 and you scramble 9 yards for a first down in the middle of a drive that leads to a touchdown or leads to points, otherwise it would have been a punt. I mean, those are the types of plays that make the difference in games in general and certainly in championship games and certainly in close championship games, which I expect this one will be. So, yes, I think he's still able to do it in the sense of he can find the holes to do it. I think he's quick to take off and understand where to go. He's not going to be running around like, Lamar Jackson or anybody like that.
Right.
But I think it's an important weapon for them, and I think he will probably be able to find a way to make some of these plays to do it. Yeah, the Eagles being able to handle that is going to be a big part of this. The other piece of it that I'm fascinated to watch is Steve Spagnuolo. I mean, that guy has done as impressive a job over the long haul of continuing to find ways to get to quarterbacks with different types of pressure, different types of coverages as anybody in the NFL. And they did a number on Jalen Hurts a couple of years ago. Are they able to do that again when Barkley is there? I'm interested to watch all of the X's and O's with that as well. I think it's going to, I mean, it's one of those games that everybody, and I initially was like this too, of, well, okay, it's these two teams again. We've seen them a lot, but they'll play, I think, a compelling game. And when you've got the idea of the Chiefs trying to do something that's never been done, we may be sick of the Chiefs. I get that, but it's also fun to watch history. It's fun to watch things that have never happened before. So that component of it makes it, I think, a pretty compelling matchup too.
I don't think there's any question about that part of it. We were talking earlier about Andy Reid is interesting to me because obviously in a league that's gone more and more to these young, withered and wow, BMI heavy coaches who are just like in perfect shape. Yep. You get Andy Reid, who doesn't play that part, doesn't seem all that interested in pursuing that particular line. And beyond that, what strikes me, maybe he just hides it better. He never seems tight to me. And maybe if you have Mahomes, you don't have to be. But nevertheless, even if you have a great quarterback, there are other coaches that you feel like, okay, they are tightening up here. And I don't know if now he feels like he's playing with house money because obviously his reputation is gold. I mean, if he doesn't do another thing, if they don't win the Super Bowl this year, he's not going to get ripped, I don't think. So what's the Andy Reid secret to serenity? Because it does seem like he's got that going for him.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it does seem like he's got a pretty good handle on how to go through all of it. And some of that may be he's been in this spot an awful lot. I mean, this is the fifth time he's been in a Super Bowl with the Chiefs. Yes, I think he was in two with the Eagles as the head coach. They played in I don't even know how many NFC Championship games. Probably, I think they lost 2 or 3 in a row before they finally got to a Super Bowl. And then even going back to that Mike Holmgren staff in Green Bay, I think he was on a couple of Super Bowl teams there. So the number of times he has been in these types of spots, just looking at it now, 5 NFC title games in Philly, and then he's had 7 in a row in AFC title games in Kansas City. So it does probably get to a point where you have been through this enough, as much as you can ever say, hey, it's just another Sunday. I don't know that you can in the Super Bowl when you're playing for those kinds of things, especially playing for the first three-peat in all of it being done entirely in the Super Bowl era. I think the Packers, 2 of the 3 were Super Bowls, but this would be unique and distinct in the Super Bowl era. I don't know how you could just kind of be like, yeah, well, it's a normal day, but this level of experience, this level of familiarity with this scene and this level of pressure, I suppose, does help, and just it makes it a little easier to approach each one of these things as its own entity rather than making it bigger than it needs to be.
Everybody wants us. I've gotten several emails about Myles Garrett each day since he made his announcement that he wants out. I'm guessing every team is saying, hey, let's go get him. I'm assuming it's easier said than done. What do you make of that story and any potential Vikings connection to it?
Well, I mean, I think it's certainly easier said than done because the Browns are still, I'm sure, going to say, hey, that's great, but let's try to work it out and let's try to get some things figured out. When you have a pass rusher of that magnitude, you don't just give those guys away. And if you're going to do it, it's going to cost a lot in a trade with whoever wants to do it. I guess the one thing I would say on the Vikings perspective of this is Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and Andrew Berry, the Browns GM, are very, very close. And Kwesi obviously worked for Andrew Berry in Cleveland before he came to Minnesota. Kevin Stefanski obviously has a lot of connections to the Vikings as well. And the Browns have a lot of cap things to figure out with all of the Deshaun Watson things and everything to go there. So if the Browns did decide to do it and the Vikings were interested enough to spend what it would take to get him here, I do think the fact that those two have done business together before is not it's not a disadvantage to the Vikings. And I don't know if they're going to go try to pursue him. I don't know if they would put that at the top of the priority list. I certainly think a guy like that, if you can get him, you find a way to go after him. But if they did decide to do it, I think that relationship and that level of trust between the two of them to find a deal and probably to think the same way about it in a lot of ways does help if the Vikings do decide to chase him.
Dave Burkett just tweeted that Kevin O'Connell said their goal is to win a championship, and Myles Garrett is going to be a big part of that.
Boy.
I don't know if you want to factor that into any reporting. So I know it's Friday night, Ben, but maybe go chase that in New Orleans.
We thought that's what he heard.
Yeah.
I mean, he was walking by. He was in a hurry.
And honestly, I was just doom scrolling while you guys were talking.
Right.
I might have missed it, too, because now I'm on a completely different algorithm. But Burkett is on it, and he's the 4-time Michigan Sports Writer of the Year.
Yeah, great reputation. But unfortunately now, he might become a bit here on the bumper.
We probably should, just for clarification, so we don't get accused of this, because people might be hopping in their car right now. No, that tweet did not happen. That's a joke.
That's called satire.
From about 20 minutes ago.
A callback regarding the real tweets from Burkett on the
I don't want to get aggregated on Florio.
Thank you, my friend. We'll be in touch.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Dan.
That is Ben Goessling, brought to you by our good friends at Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. Lavelle in a half hour. The top 5 at 5 will include what?
Kevin O'Connell, Jared Allen, and are the Minnesota Timberwolves good standing pat?
The lottery is not about getting rich. It's about helping people, and it always has been. The lottery is what helped raise the Great Wall of China, build the roads of Rome, and today in South Carolina, it's what generates millions of dollars each year for scholarships like the SC Hope, Life, and Palmetto Fellows. The South Carolina Education Lottery is investing in you. Visit sceducationlottery.com/betteryou to learn more.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? If you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. Choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
On Saturday, February 22nd at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, it's the Pro Volleyball Federation's first All-Star match. The league's biggest stars will clash in a can't-miss event hosted in the Indy metro area, home of the Indy Ignite. Catch every serve, spike, and save live on CBS. Don't miss this historic showdown of volleyball's finest. The Pro Volleyball Federation All-Star Match on February 22nd at 1:30 p.m. Be there.